Imagine paying every bill on time, your mortgage cleared, taxes handled, and still getting kicked out of your own house, by your HOA. Sounds absurd, right? You'd think once you own your home, that's the end of the story, you're safe, secure, untouchable. But what if I told you that hidden deep in the fine print of some HOA agreements is a clause that can end that illusion overnight? No matter if you're 30 or 70, no matter if you've lived there your whole life, they can still take it all. That's the nightmare I woke up to. Years of quiet living, morning coffee on the porch, trimming my garden, waving at the same neighbors I'd known for a decade, until one morning, a letter slid under my door saying I'd violated neighborhood standards. I remember staring at it, confused, thinking it had to be a mistake. How serious could it be? A lawn too long? A flag too bright? A driveway not pristine enough? I laughed, tossed it aside, and told myself it would blow over. But each envelope that followed landed on my doorstep like a warning shot. And soon, everyone on the block knew who was behind it, the HOA Karen. You could hear her voice before you saw her coming, sharp, self-righteous, the kind that made your stomach tighten before you even turned around. She wasn't enforcing community rules, she was enforcing her ego. In her mind, she wasn't just a board member. She was the sheriff, the mayor, and the moral compass of the entire street. And I was her newest target. It started with warnings. Then fines. Then threats. One morning, a thick envelope appeared, heavier than usual. Inside was a court notice. She had filed a legal claim, demanding I vacate my property for noncompliance. My own home, the one I'd built, repaired, and fully paid for, was now being treated like rented space in her kingdom. Sounds insane, doesn't it? But that wasn't even the craziest part. Because what happened next made the entire courtroom go silent. You've seen the headline, Judge exposes the HOA Karen scam. But before that moment, before the cameras, before justice, this story nearly destroyed everything I had. Before all this chaos, my life was simple. Peaceful. The kind of quiet existence you earn after years of hard work. Morning started with sunlight spilling across the kitchen table and the soft hum of sprinklers outside. My home wasn't perfect, but it was mine, a small corner of peace in a world that never seemed to slow down. That peace ended the day I met her. It started with something as harmless as a smile, that kind of fake politeness that hides 1,000 judgments. Just keeping the neighborhood beautiful, she'd say, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning every inch of my yard like she owned it. I didn't realize it then, but every glance, every casual question, was a silent warning, my home was under inspection. The first letter was easy to ignore. The second felt strange. The third? It started to feel personal. Each notice of violation arrived with a new accusation, unauthorized lawn ornament, improper fence color, non-compliant mailbox design. It would have been laughable if it hadn't felt so targeted. At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just how HOAs worked. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Because every fine came with her signature. Every threat had her name attached. It wasn't about community, it was about control. And when people like her get a little bit of power, they don't just enforce rules, they invent them. I tried reasoning with the board, explaining that I'd fixed every so-called violation. They nodded politely, promised to look into it, then quietly sided with her. That's when I realized, the HOA wasn't there to protect homeowners like me. It was there to protect itself. The more I resisted, the worse it got. Letters turned into late fees. Late fees became penalties. Penalties turned into threats of legal action. Every envelope felt heavier, every visit from her more hostile. She'd stand at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, just watching. Not saying a word. Just waiting for me to make a mistake she could pounce on. And that's when I started asking myself the question every homeowner should ask but never does. How much power does an HOA really have? Can they actually take your home over something as ridiculous as a mailbox or a patch of grass? The truth is more disturbing than most people realize. Because HOAs operate under a system of liens and compliance fines that can quietly grow in the background. They don't need to take your home through force, they can do it through paperwork. Through interest. Through technicalities buried so deep that even your lawyer might miss them. And she knew exactly how to play that game. It was no longer about my home, it was about breaking me down, one letter, one fee, one threat at a time. What I didn't know was that this paper war was just the beginning. Because the next envelope she sent wasn't just another warning, it was a weapon that could have taken everything I owned. The next envelope wasn't like the others. It was heavier, like it carried bad news, or worse, intent. The paper inside smelled faintly of ink and threat. And when I opened it, I felt my heart drop. It wasn't a warning this time. It was a lien notice. The HOA was officially claiming I owed them thousands in accrued fines for supposed violations. They were threatening to foreclose on my home. My home, the one I'd owned free and clear for years. Paid off. Built with sweat, late nights, and memories. All because someone decided my mailbox was too old-fashioned. At first, I thought there had to be a mistake. Surely no sane system would allow something this ridiculous. But when I called the HOA office, her voice answered. Calm. Cold. Certain. Everything is by the book, she said. You were given multiple chances to comply. That phrase, by the book, echoed in my head for days. What book? Who wrote it? And why did it suddenly feel like I was living inside of it? I called a lawyer, desperate for answers. He sighed the second I mentioned HOA foreclosure. They can do it, he said quietly. If the fines are unpaid long enough, they can legally place a lien and pursue foreclosure. It's rare, but it happens more than you'd think. I hung up, stunned. So this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a trap built into the system. A system designed to bleed homeowners dry through compliance fees that compound faster than most people can pay. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt like a countdown. The home that had always been my refuge now felt like a ticking time bomb. And outside, I could hear her. HOA Karen. Her footsteps on the sidewalk, her flashlight scanning my yard like a patrol. The sound of her voice drifting through the dark, smug, self-assured, untouchable. It wasn't just about the rules anymore. It was about dominance. The power to make someone feel small in the one place they should feel safe. Days turned into weeks. Letters turned into official notices. Then, the final blow, a summons to court. She'd taken it all the way, filing for foreclosure in the county court. My stomach twisted as I stared at the document. It felt unreal. I wasn't a criminal. I hadn't hurt anyone. I just wanted to live in peace. But peace, I was learning, is expensive in HOA territory. The neighborhood was silent, but not supportive. No one wanted to get involved. Everyone feared being next. They waved from a distance now, polite, distant smiles that said, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you." And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just my fight. This was a warning to everyone who ever thought homeownership meant freedom. Because if an HOA can threaten a man's home over a mailbox, what's stopping them from doing it to you? The paper war was no longer about property lines, it was about control, fear, and silence. And I was about to break that silence in front of a judge who'd seen it all, but never this. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, in tone. Every sound echoed like judgment, the shuffle of papers, the clack of shoes on tile, the murmur of whispers from people who came to watch another homeowner fight an unwinnable battle. HOA Karen sat across the aisle, chin high, her binder stacked like ammunition. Every tab, every document, every smirk screamed confidence. She'd done this before, probably to others who didn't have the strength to fight back. But today, she wasn't facing a scared homeowner. She was facing someone who'd had enough. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. He was older, measured, the kind of man who'd seen too many ridiculous cases in his career. He glanced at the papers, sighed, and asked the HOA's representative to begin. And that's when Karen took the stage, every word dripping with self-righteous venom. "Your Honor," she began, "this homeowner has repeatedly violated community standards. We've issued multiple fines, notices, and opportunities to comply. Unfortunately, he's chosen to ignore them." Ignore them. I wanted to laugh. I hadn't ignored them, I'd survived them. Every fine, every fabricated rule, every threat. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't have fancy binders or legal jargon. Just a folder, worn, bent, filled with every letter she'd ever sent me. I laid them on the table one by one, like evidence of obsession. Then I handed over a copy of the HOA's bylaws, the same book she had used as a weapon. Except this time, I'd highlighted a few things she didn't want anyone to notice. Page 47, Clause 9b, fines exceeding property maintenance costs must be subject to board approval. She never got that approval. Page 52, Clause 12a, board members must disclose personal grievances that could influence enforcement actions. She never did that either. The judge's expression changed, subtle at first, then unmistakable. He leaned back, hands folded, and stared directly at her. "Is this accurate?" For the first time since this began, HOA Karen didn't have words. Her face tightened. Her lips parted, searching for excuses that didn't exist. The silence in that courtroom felt like justice taking its first breath. The judge cleared his throat. "I've seen abuse of power in many forms," he said slowly, "but this is something else." He turned toward me. "You don't owe them a cent." Then toward her, "And as for this HOA, I'm ordering an internal audit effective immediately." The gasp that followed came from her own board members. The people who'd once nodded along to her tyranny suddenly couldn't look her in the eye. For a moment, she tried to speak, to salvage control, but the judge's gavel hit the bench like thunder. "Case dismissed." The words echoed in my head, over and over, "Case dismissed." Just like that, months of fear, threats, and sleepless nights dissolved into silence. But the real victory wasn't the dismissal, it was watching her walk out of that courtroom with her power stripped bare. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood with fear now couldn't even meet a single gaze. The judge's reaction wasn't just priceless, it was poetic. Because sometimes, justice doesn't whisper. It booms. When I walked out of that courtroom, the air felt different, lighter, real. For the first time in months, I could breathe without waiting for the next letter, the next knock, the next threat. The courthouse doors closed behind me like a gate shutting out every sleepless night I'd spent wondering if I'd lose everything I'd worked for. But victory didn't feel like celebration, it felt like survival. Because even though the judge saw through the lies, I knew the system that allowed them was still standing. I wasn't the first person to be dragged into this paper war, and I wouldn't be the last. Neighbors began to talk. Some apologized, some avoided eye contact, guilt written across their faces. The same people who had stayed silent while she harassed me now whispered about how they always knew something was wrong. But silence, I realized, is what gives people like her their power. I went home that evening and stood in my yard, the same yard that had somehow started all this. The grass swayed gently in the wind, the garden lights flickered on, and for a moment, everything looked exactly the same, but it wasn't. Because now, every inch of it carried a story, proof that peace can be taken from you not by force, but by rules. And that's the part most homeowners never see coming. It's not the law you should fear, it's the people who twist it. Because behind every HOA, every regulation, every smiling committee member, there might be someone waiting to turn control into power, and power into punishment. I won my case, but it made me realize something bigger. Homeownership isn't just about owning property. It's about defending it. Defending your right to peace, to privacy, to dignity. And if you think this could never happen to you, that's exactly what I thought too. The judge's words still echo in my head, this is something else. Because it was. It wasn't just a lawsuit, it was a warning shot to every homeowner who's ever trusted their HOA blindly. And the real question is, how many more people will have to stand in that same courtroom before the system finally changes? If you think this story was unbelievable, wait till you see what happens when an HOA calls the cops on a homeowner for parking in his own driveway. It's one of the craziest stories I've ever covered, and it proves just how far they'll go to control your life. Check out that story next, and remember, stay alert, stay informed, and stay free. This is the HOA Warzone.